Hello, everyone, and welcome to our training, How Missouri Delivers Better Social Services. My name is Emily Jarvis, and I'm the Senior Manager for Events here at GovLoop, and today I have the added pleasure of also being your moderator, so thanks so much for joining me. And a special thank you to our partners at Genesis and Google Cloud for helping us put on this session today. So let's not waste a minute, because delivering social services programs effectively and efficiently is paramount for government agencies. And a lot of the work that happens at contact centers, however, outdated technology can cause delays and frustration, both for government employees and, of course, their constituents. And that's exactly what had plagued the state of Missouri for years until they embraced cloud and artificial intelligence. And that's what our experts are going to talk about today. But before we jump into that tremendous content, I do have a few housekeeping items to go over with you all. First things first, if you're on Twitter, please share what you are learning alongside us using the hashtag GLTrain. We also have some great resources available for you on the console, so make sure you check those out. You don't want to miss out on a single learning opportunity. If you do need the closed captioning feature, just look for the icon on the bottom right-hand side of the media player. That's where our faces are showing up right now. Of course, we hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but they happen. And if they do, send us a message to that Ask a Question tab, and my colleague Maddie will help get your question answered. And it's in that same portal where you can ask our experts questions. So don't you dare be shy. Be putting your questions in early and often, because that's why we're here. We're here to answer your questions. Finally, we are recording this training, so you can check your inboxes tomorrow, because there'll be an email in there with a link to this session, so you can watch it again or send it along to one of your colleagues. All right, with all of that pesky housekeeping out of the way, I want to introduce you to today's speakers. Joining us are Nicole Conway, who's a program manager for the Missouri Department of Social Services. We also have Scott Dunn, who's a public sector account team at Genesis, and Jeremy Dottenham, who is the public sector account team at Google Cloud. Thank you all so much for being here. And we're going to kick things off with a little Q&A specifically with Nicole. So Nicole, I want to talk a little bit, because this is a big topic. So can you lay the groundwork for me by telling me about the Department of Social Services and where some of your pain points existed?
Sure. So Department of Social Services, specifically the Family Support Division, determines eligibility for public assistance programs like SNAP, Medicaid, temporary assistance, and child care subsidy. SNAP recipients are approved for a limited time, either 12 or 24 months, depending on their household situation. And at the end of their certification period, then they have to recertify, which includes doing an interview, either over the phone or in person at a local resource center. And new SNAP applicants also are required to complete an interview unless they qualify for a waiver, either in person or over the phone based on their preference. And during the pandemic, we saw a significant rise in new SNAP applicants. And this really added to, a workload that was already at capacity from existing SNAP recipients and regular flow of new applicants.
So those are some really big challenges. And I think part of the core problem here is that you were at a situation where delivering good customer experience wasn't sort of meeting up with the expectations that they might have had. I want to ask a question that might sound a little silly on the surface, but why is improving customer experience or constituent experience so important for the state in the first place?
So people who are qualifying for these programs that we determine eligibility for, these are income-based programs. And so these people are at their most vulnerable time income-wise. And during the pandemic, like I said, we saw a lot of brand new families who had never been on public assistance before. They'd never had to navigate a government form or process like this before. So, they don't need a difficult government process to frustrate them at their lowest economic point. And the stressors they're going through right now are obviously very, very real. And so FSD really wants to make sure that applying for benefits that they need to survive isn't one of those stressors.
I think that's a really impactful way to think about this too. And what you said at the very beginning, that vulnerable piece, you want to be there for your vulnerable community. It really struck a chord with me. I want to go back to a few of the challenges that you were talking about here at the beginning. And I want to get specific because sometimes when we talk about customer experience, it can be very theoretical. So how high did the customer wait times, customer wait times impact the decision to modernize?
This goes back to from their local timely. Many things changed for people during COVID. You know, their kids are attending school, all those factors, and waiting on the phone for 2+ hours to get that food while they're dealing with everything else, not good. So something absolutely had to change, and so we had to research other options.
Gotcha. So similarly, talk to me about negative media attention that may have existed or kind of contributed to this decision.
Sure. So we would hear from our customers, from our clients through surveys, or just when we did finally are able to get them on the phone, you know, their concerns about having to wait so long. And then once the newspapers and media outlets gets a hold of that story, then it just puts additional pressure on the department to make changes and make them fast.
That makes a whole lot of sense. All right, I want to bring now Jeremy and Scott into the discussion as well, and really be thinking about how the three of you sort of created this partnership to help the state really transform their experience. So, Scott, I'm going to start with you. Can you share a little bit about how the partnership helped transform customer experience for the state?
Yeah, sure, Emily. So the customer experience with Genesis is really what we start to refer to as Genesis Cloud CX. It unifies customer and agent experiences across phone, email, chat, text, and social channels. Genesis strives to create a new world of efficiency and empathy where contact centers anticipate needs and respond so fully that customers feel pleased with every interaction. In this specific use case, leveraging Genesis and Google AI, and incorporating data integration and analytics and machine learning, Nicole can personalize and continually improve customer engagements. Genesis refers to this as AI-powered journey orchestration, and Nicole is now seeing those results.
Awesome. And then Jeremy, same question to you. What has been your experience and kind of the role in this partnership?
Yeah, no, we've been excited to partner with Genesis in the state of Missouri. And if you look at it in phases, that really the first phase, it's just getting really good at facilitating humans talking to computers with CCAI. Then in the next phase, we opened up this platform and allowed it to communicate with other systems. This increased automation from Missouri. It allowed contact centers to answer more calls, and in many cases, keep contact centers open 24/7. And I think, like, you know, especially in Missouri and other states, this all started with the pandemic. The pandemic was driving the need to address more customers, to adopt automation. And what we're seeing now is states trying to further deploy AI to allow for more self-service capabilities within their contact center. And of course, not unlike the solution we're going to talk about today with Missouri, the scheduler system.
Gotcha. So, Nicole, you've heard what the gentleman had to say. What has been your experience with the partnership and how it helped transform your customer experience?
So the partnership between Genesis and Google and state of Missouri has just been phenomenal. We went in thinking we knew what we wanted, and then after conversations with Scott and Jeremy, realized that we didn't even know it was possible. So then we had, even more design sessions about what about this and what about this and can it do this? And 9 times out of 10, the answer was yes. And then both agencies have been just really wonderful and flexible, and especially when we just changed our minds, or the scope has changed or something like that, they've been very flexible and understanding about the needs of our agency.
Well, that is wonderful. We love an agile environment for sure. All right, Nicole, we're going to keep you on the hot seat here for just a second, because I am curious, and our audience is as well, is what are some of the elements that have changed in this process, whether it's text messaging, live chat? Talk to me a little bit about some of those changes.
Sure. So in September of 21, we implemented SMS text messaging, where individuals can ask general program questions and they get a live agent on the other end walking them through the process, how to apply, how to turn in information, what the policy is regarding their situation, things like that. And we get about 550 hits a month on that text line, and it doesn't take more than a couple of people a day to man it, which it gives the staff a break, right, from back-to-back phone calls every day, and then also provides this other opportunity for our clients to reach us in a timely manner. And then along that same line, in March of 22, we implemented a chat bot and a live chat functionality. And so whenever somebody comes into the chat, they hit the chat bot first and they get answers to their general questions like that. And then if they want to speak to a live agent, they can, and then they get right into the live agent, and they can handle anything over chat that they can handle on a phone call, except for a Snap interview. So the volume is on chat is much higher than on SMS, which we found pretty interesting. We get about 32,000 hits on the chat a month, with only about half of those actually choosing to go to a live agent. The rest are satisfied with the answer they got from the bot and didn't need a live agent to intervene. And implementing that has not only helped with efficiency, but it's also helped with staff retention. We have many offices that are on the phones every day, all day. And implementing this, we were able to put them on a rotation where they take weekly turns doing the chat and then weekly on the phones. And it's helped with burnout from taking back-to-back calls every day.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that burnout would feel like. So to be able to relieve some of that, even so someone can take a step outside for a few minutes, could be really impactful. Similarly, I think we've all been in situations where we don't have an appointment scheduled and you just show up, like you have to go to the DMV or something like that, and there's really long wait lines. It can be really stressful. I know you all work together to create a scheduling application as well to help alleviate some of that stress. Tell me a little bit about that scheduling assistant.
So previously, we had something online where clients could fill out a form to request an appointment. It did not schedule an appointment of any kind. It created a SharePoint task for staff to pull, and then those staff would call the client to see why they needed an appointment, and then try to schedule with their local office, just based on their local office's schedule and their schedule, to see when is a good time to match up. So that's a lot of manual work. It's a lot of double work. And so in March of 23, we implemented a virtual agent scheduling application. And this scheduling application actually schedules the appointment. So a user can come in through chat or through our call center and work with the virtual agent based on their schedule and our schedule and create an appointment. And there's no worker tied to that or agent tied up with trying to figure out how to schedule that or if the availability is going to work out or not. There's approximately 125 local resource centers across the state, and they all have different availability based on staffing. Some can take 4 appointments an hour, some can only take 1. And so the scheduling agent takes all of that into account and works on scheduling the appointment that meets the needs of both the person and the office. So users can schedule an appointment, they can cancel an appointment, they can reschedule an appointment, all through that virtual agent without having to ever speak to anybody over the phone or through chat. And so
Well,
for phone,
oh yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
For phone appointments, we accept 15 per hour between the hours of 9 and 3. And then what happens is the night before, we take the list of appointments for each hour and load them into a Genesis outbound campaign, which allows them to automatically be called. So you're not having workers go, well, I got distracted, or my break went too long, or whatever. It calls out automatically. So the appointments are made on time. And that's really helped staff not have to follow a manual process as well.
It's got to help the constituents as well, just to have that one direct link versus, like you said before, kind of running around. You're waiting for people to get back to you. When or will this happen? That's a big relief all the way around. All right, one final question for you in this little part here, Nicole. And that's really around how and why you came to this solution set. So obviously, in your case, you were working very closely with the Genesis and Google Cloud. How did you come to choose them as your solution?
So in 2019, our governor's office put together a call center task force that was made up of team members across all 17 agencies to come together to talk about how they operated their call centers, what are the best practices, what are the pain points that we were experiencing across the state. And part of that task force included several different vendors. And during that task force, we got to see a demo of Genesis, and I think we all fell out of our chair because they're just, they have very robust features than what we had seen previously.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to see what a cloud-based operation looks like. We were operating on-prem before, and which again just opens our eyes more to what is possible and not what you just have to deal with. So we got to see how bots can be used to answer questions, how scheduling staff's breaks and lunches can be more efficient than just working off of a spreadsheet, and more local agency control, better reporting, and then of course the SMS and the chat as well.
That is wonderful. And I think we can all agree getting out of a spreadsheet is a huge relief, unless, of course, you're married to an accountant like me who finds a use for spreadsheets for just about everything. So, Jeremy, you've obviously heard from Nicole's perspective how this has been a wonderful experience for her. For others who are listening to today's session, what is Google Cloud's role in this process, specifically when it comes to improving that customer experience or constituent experience?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Google's role is really to provide solutions to augment the telephony or IVR platform. So in many cases, that's with AI.
Mm-hmm.
So when we need to bring in data from disparate sources, when we need to build unique processes to meet the needs of a state, these are all areas where we're using Google Cloud to improve customer experience and deploy new features and capabilities to the state and its citizens.
And Scott, from your perspective, this is obviously a close partnership that Genesis and Google Cloud are doing together. What is Genesis's role in this CX improvement plan?
Yeah, Emily. So Genesis' role is really simple, right? We are the platform, we're the backbone. By leveraging the Genesis experience orchestration and Google AI at the state of Missouri, the agencies are basically roughly saying a third of the calls that come in are being self-serviced, as Jeremy mentioned before. And that's a huge game changer. I mean, a third of the calls coming in self-serviced. And you see the agencies and the impact to these agencies is actually very measurable, and the results are very, very real. And we can talk about that a little bit later on. And that's really the impact of what working with Genesis and Google has brought to the state of Missouri.
Awesome. All right, so let's get down into the nitty gritty because we've brought some stats and we love to see that. So Nicole, can you tell me a little bit about some of the caseload differences between 2019 and 2020? And I think we just want to go one slide forward here. Yep.
Yeah, so 2019 really shows what our steady volume of SNAP cases looked like. We have a little bump in February, but overall it remains pretty steady. And then you see in 2020, it jumps real high in March. And that's really when the pandemic really started to hit everybody. And that's when we started to see the initial effects of that. And it drops a little bit, but it's still, the steady is still way higher than what we were experiencing before.
Definitely. All right, so then let's jump to the next one here. And for this one, Nicole, what does the graph show about SNAP interview deflection rates from 2019 versus 2021?
Right. So I want to explain a little bit about what we're talking about when we say deflection, because it can range across, across all kinds of agencies and call centers. So what we're talking about when we say deflection is if the queue was basically too full and we had to play a message that said, we can't take your call right now, please call us back. And so that's what our deflection rate is. So obviously we want to keep that as low as possible. And in 2019, we were operating on an on-prem solution with a limited number of lines for callers to use to get into that queue. And it really was, the queue hits this number and that's it. No more people can get in. It wasn't very dynamic or robust there. So when the queue gets full, it causes the caller to hear a message to try back again. And you know, many things affect the agency's capability to answer all the incoming calls. Staffing, tenure of that staff, are they in training? Do they still need a mentor? Things like that. And then of course, volume versus available staff. And this slide shows in July of 2019, we were deflecting a little over 60% of our calls. And 2 years later in that same month, we're deflecting around 10%. It's a huge jump.
Gotcha. All right, we've got one more chart to show folks. And for this one, we are looking at the SNAP average speed to answer. So what does this one tell us?
So this is how long somebody waited to get a hold of an agent in our queue. So September to February is what we thought our new norm was going to look like. We had some flexibilities from our federal partners that allowed us to maintain the call volume by waiving some of the interviews that were required. But in 2021, those flexibilities expired, and everybody who was on SNAP in 2020 are now due to recertify, which of course requires an interview. So we clearly don't have the staffing to keep up with the volume of calls. But in March, we went live with the appointment scheduler, and you see that average speed to answer drop significantly as people are scheduling their time when they can do their interview and manage their benefits on their time and not on the state's time.
I think these graphs really do a great job of showcasing exactly what you're talking about, because it is so impactful. I have a couple more questions for you, Nicole, when it comes to the results. And I want to start with the impact to the community and the constituents. Now, I know it might seem a little obvious based on the slides that you were just showing us, but talk to me a little bit about sort of the overall feel and impact from the community side of things.
So we have a customer experience team that does outreach for people who called the day before or people who have visited us in the resource center to gauge what their experience was. And once we implemented the scheduler, the positive surveys just shot up immediately. And they were so glad to have the opportunity. And then they were so glad when we actually called them at their appointment time.
Yeah.
So they are very, they are very excited about it. And we also have a survey online that people can go to tell us about their experience, and the amount of those surveys that were submitted also increased as well. And so we've gotten a lot of good feedback from the community about this.
Well, and I think you said it at the beginning, what you are providing here is so critically important to the life of people, getting them the food and benefits that they need to be able to reduce the amount of time it takes to get enrolled in these programs or to get access to this is truly life altering for some of these people. So that is wonderful to see that impact. Scott, I'm curious from your perspective, do the results that you're seeing with Nicole and the state of Missouri, do they mirror very closely to other agencies or customers that you've worked with?
Yeah, great question, Emily. And as a matter of fact, they do. As I stated earlier, when contact centers have roughly a third of the calls that can go to self-service because a bot can actually, answer a question or it can solve for a problem, and that constituent gets a very positive result from that. And it's done in a matter of minutes versus being on hold for hours trying to get an answer to something. If you're a constituent or a business unit calling into one of these agencies in the state of Missouri, that many times the handle times can be upwards of an hour. And by leveraging this technology and mapping this back to solve for what Nicole had, what her challenges were, Google and Genesis were very instrumental, I think, in helping provide this solution.
Definitely. And Jeremy, obviously you're working with Genesis here, but it's similar experiences, similar results that you're seeing with your other agencies that you're working with?
Yeah, just to echo what Scott said, I mean, we've often found problems that integration and automation can have really impactful results in a pretty short amount of time. I've seen though that a lot of our customers, they're saddled with old technology, or they tried a bot of some kind, a previous generation of a bot, and did have a good experience. Mm-hmm. So really a big focus of what we're doing is just evangelizing how big of an impact Google's CCAI and Genesis can bring.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a good point, because all of us have probably been burned by technology at some point, some early iteration, and then you're like, no, I'm not going to use that anymore. But things change so quickly, and the operations and the abilities and the applications develop so rapidly that technology that you're talking about yesterday is going to be very different than the stuff you can do. So I think that's a really impactful point. All right, which sort of brings us to our next theme here, which is, well, where do we go from here? So Nicole, I'm going to start with you. What's on the horizon for your modernization efforts? What are you really looking towards?
So, I mean, sky's the limit, right? Additional enhancements all the way around as we continue to hear from our customers on how they want to interact with us. We continue to want to make changes. So, adding email communications, doing in-person appointments, but virtually, providing translation services in the IVR rather than having them to connect to an agent to answer the same questions that they would have gotten answered in the IVR if we had the translation services, and then providing some more case information via the chatbot that again would reduce the need for an agent to look up case information. So lots of things happening. My mind is often just swirling around, and I'll text Scott or Jeremy, at inappropriate times of the day and ask them, what do you think about this? And they're really great about responding.
Well, we love to see that. I would love to be a fly on the wall of your group chat at like 7 p.m. or 3 a.m. when you get a genius idea to see the responses there. So to help fuel Nicole's idea generation, Jeremy, tell me some new developments that are on the horizon for Google Cloud that might help her or her fellow Govies really kind of grow.
Yeah, I think we would all agree that we're in a period of change when it comes to AI. There's a lot of new AI technologies that are going to be coming out in the next few months. Generative AI is one of them, right? So we hear a lot about generative AI. There'll be some significant announcements there, and then announcements around our existing AI product set. So be on the lookout for those in the coming months.
Awesome. And Scott, what do you have to add to the mix here?
Well, Emily, really simple. At Genesis, we're really excited about the future and leveraging experience orchestration with the state of Missouri. Experience orchestration really helps our clients reimagine how to design experiences that are effortless and meaningful. It helps automate better outcomes using turnkey AI, and innovate using smart solutions and that empower and uncover actionable insights. At the end of the day, Genesis is continuing to be excited about delivering results for both Nicole and the rest of the state of Missouri.
Wonderful. All right. Now it is time for our attendees to get their say in the matter. So if you have been holding back on asking a question, well, stop. It is now your time to flood the Q&A box with questions, but we already have plenty in the queue. And Nicole, you're up first in our rapid fire Q&A part. And an attendee said, listen, I'm in a similar position. We're not going to name states here or cities, but they were curious, what were some of the elements that you were looking for in contact center modernization solutions? So what are some of the things that you were looking for that maybe they should add to their list as well?
So two big things come to mind when I think about what we were looking for. And one of those is, how easy is it to manage? And how easy was it to explain to someone outside of the agency? Missouri has a central IT unit that supports all agencies and divisions, and they are a phenomenal team that is often pulled in 1,000 different directions, right? And every agency's project is the priority. So one of the big selling points of Genesis was how easy it was for the agency to manage things themselves. And they provided training and resources throughout our implementation, and really made sure that we were prepared and had the support we needed, not only when we went live, but post go live as well. And the next thing that I was looking for was, how easy is it going to be to explain this process that the calls go through, the call flows, to an advocate or a legislator or a customer even. And we found that report definitions from other solution providers can be a little bit more fluid than we like. we have to report our numbers and budget books to General Assembly every year. Plus, Missouri has a sunshine law that allows public to request records in an effort to be transparent, and that includes call center records. And if we can't articulate how these numbers are calculated, then it doesn't look very good. And Genesis is very transparent about their metric definitions, and they have an online resource guide that you can, for lack of a better word, Google and look up and see, how is the average speed to answer calculated, how is the average handle time calculated, and you can pull all that information together, and it means that we know how to explain it without having to have an IT degree. So they're easily understandable and can be translated to anyone outside the call center. And the next thing I would say is, what kind of support, are you going to get from a modernization standpoint? And the support from both Google and Genesis has just been fantastic. They provide so much information, and the willingness and ability to keep a project moving through roadblocks is really what has made our relationship successful.
Well, that is wonderful. And you answered with that our next attendee's question of what makes a partnership successful. So really appreciate you doing a 2-for-1 special there. But if you thought that got you out of the hot seat here, Nicole, well, unfortunately, you are wrong. So Nicole, talk to me a little bit about the modernization process in terms of time. How long did it take?
Okay, so it took about a full year to get implemented, which sounds like a really long time. But when you think about all of the things that we brought into this process, a year wasn't that big of a deal. It was an ACD with multiple queues and skills, a very robust IVR that uses a web service to pull case data from a legacy backend system and relay that information to a caller in a user-friendly way. Outbound campaigns for Snap interviews, call recording, workforce management, forecasting, quality evaluation, and probably more that I'm forgetting. So it wasn't just like buy a phone number and turn it on. It was, right, all of those things put together.
Well, a year sounds pretty speedy. So that is great. All right. We've got a great attendee question in here that basically asks, well, who the heck is involved in this process? Obviously, in your case, Nicole, you've got your 2 friends here on the panel, but who else was involved in this process?
Right. So the technical engineers that were assigned to our case for both the initial Genesis migration and for the scheduler, where they were just fantastic. They would ask us, how does it work today? And then they would ask us, how do you want it to work in the future? So we could really articulate what our pain points were. And then they would also come back and make suggestions when we weren't sure what we wanted to do. We could explain what we wanted, what happened today, but asking the question of how do you want it to work? A lot of times, we didn't know, because we don't know what we don't know. And so they were really great about bringing that information back to us. And then, the documentation and training and support teams provided by both Genesis and Google have been something I've never experienced before. They were always flexible and very patient. And I ask about 1,000 questions in every meeting. And it's pretty odd if we go through a meeting and I don't have any questions. In fact, it's usually called out if that happens. If somebody asks if there are any questions and I don't go, I have several, then Scott is usually like, really? Are you sure?
Very true. Very true.
You were that girl in class that was like, hey friends,
Yeah,
I do have a question.
I think I sent them 5 pages of questions in the first after the demo, like, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And they responded in kind.
That is what we like to hear. All right, Nicole, one more speed round question for you. How many departments, agents, locations did you deploy? And if you don't have exact numbers, that's also perfect.
I of course have exact numbers. No, it's one agency. It's the Family Support Division Income Maintenance Program that was moved. And within that is 1,576 agents.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations to the 3 of you on this. All right, Scott, if you thought I was ignoring you, I am not, because I've got a question in here for you. It says you work with a lot of government agencies. What is one thing they often overlook when they're seeking out better CX with their contact centers?
Sure. I would say that one of the biggest things that's overlooked is probably change management. Let's be clear, right? Change is hard and keep status quo is easy, right? And organizations need to stop thinking like a call center and more like a contact center. And that's a huge difference in what you think about, how you approach solutions and problems and everything else across the board. And this is really where Genesis Experience Orchestration really helps the contact centers reimagine how they design experiences that are both effortless and meaningful. And I think Genesis does an amazing job of mapping our technologies back to customer problems and challenges and solving for them. And as leaders in the contact center space, this is all we do all day, every day. Again, many times to solve a problem, change has to occur. And that's been one of the biggest pleasures of working with not only Nicole, but the state of Missouri. They get it. As Nicole mentioned, we would have, I think, what, Nicole, 30 plus demos at one point in time throughout one of the years. Is that accurate?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Right. I literally, demo early, demo often. But Nicole was great because she asked all the right questions and she wasn't afraid to speak up and say, hey, here's the challenges. How can you solve for them? And what are you going to be able to do to be able to come in and impact our organization? And why should we go through that year-long change of making that move over to Genesis? And what's that really going to look like? So I would say that, one of the things that's probably most overlooked is just, be open to listening. If you're an agency, to see how Genesis can make a positive and quantifiable impact into your contact center that engages your constituents.
Wonderful. All demos all the time. I think that can be our
demo early, demo often. That's right. Exactly. And Nicole is witness of that. And again, like I said, that was the great part about it is she would come back with 5 or 10 pages of questions for us to be able to answer. And it was because she knew that change was going to be difficult, but she was willing to accept it and provide it and champion the change if all of her questions could be answered. Is that a fair statement, Nicole?
Yeah, I would agree. And again, going back to wanting to manage it myself in-house as opposed to having others do it was a key driver in most of the questions. But I mean, there was never a point in time where Genesis was like, nobody asks that question, we're not going to answer that. They always were very responsive and always had an answer that was explanatory.
Well, that is great to hear. All right. So, Jeremy, Scott just mentioned change management, and I'm curious from your perspective, what is one or two of the biggest barriers you see some of your government agencies that you all work with go through when they're updating these systems and processes?
Well, I mean, Scott kind of answered it. I mean, change management, culture, people, process, like those things are actually more of a challenge than the technology in
Right.
many cases. But if we look at the technology, it's usually about having the right data available and accessible to whatever AI tool that you're using. I mean, many states have siloed data. We have to first create data pipelines, or we have to have repositories. But it's interesting. I mean, outside of people process, if technology, data silos are the issue, it's usually not something that the technology can't fix or can't address, because it can. Oftentimes it's political, and that gets in the way of providing a cross-discipline data that produces more useful customer service solutions if I can bring in more data. So I think those are, to me, from a technology perspective, it would be about the data, but holistically, yeah, I mean, it comes down to change management, people, process, culture.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, though. If there is a barrier, oftentimes it is not the technology that is the barrier. It is the people and the process that can sometimes get in the way. All right, we are rapidly running out of time for today's session. It flew by, but I do have one final question for all three of you. And Scott, I'm going to start with you with this one. We've talked about a ton today, a whole lot. If I'm an attendee and I'm walking away from today's session, what is one thing or two things you want them to walk away with in the front of their noggins?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think a couple things. First is that Genesis and Google have really teamed up, to help agencies, solve the challenges that they face, the problems, and being able to come in there and provide measurable, quantifiable results. And I think you've seen that in previous slides that Nicole's spoken to. And then the other thing would probably just be, again, be open to learning how, Genesis orchestration can help build trust and loyalty, right? That the Genesis team has really enjoyed working with Nicole and her team. And I would say stay tuned, as really the best is yet to come, because change is happening. And both Jeremy and I talk about that as from both of our sides and what the platforms are going to look like. And we're super excited to be able to take this into the next generation.
That is very exciting. I want to point folks to the slide that's up here right now. All of these resources that are up here are also available for download on the console, so don't miss out on a single learning opportunity. But speaking of learning opportunities, Jeremy, what should the audience be thinking about as they log out today?
One thing we didn't talk about today was all the other solutions that Nicole and the state of Missouri looked at, or solutions that could have addressed this problem or addressed it in other ways. AI is at an inflection point. In the coming months, you're going to see so many new product offerings hitting the market. So even if you're looking at other technologies, look at those, meet with your trusted advisor and tech, and then come talk to the Genesis and Google team. There's some really exciting things that we're going to be able to show you and talk about in the coming months. So just stay tuned and stay in touch with Genesis and Google.
That is quite the teaser. I feel like you could do like movie trailers or something, like coming soon. We're going to learn this. All right, Nicole, you've got the hardest job here, because we got to have a takeaway different from what Scott and Jeremy have to say. So what, from your perspective, should attendees be thinking about as they log out today?
I would say don't think that because you are a government entity, you can't have modern technology. I know we were stuck there for a long time. And if you had asked me even 5 years ago when our agency would be utilizing AI or SMS even, or working from home, I would have said maybe in 20 years, not anytime soon, not in this lifetime. But we're doing all of it, and it's way easier than you think.
I love that. What a hopeful way to end us on, because you are absolutely right. It is the era of innovation. Unfortunately, though, we are out of time for today's session. I want to thank our three wonderful speakers for sharing their insights today. But a few quick reminders before you all log off. First things first, we do have those resources available for you to download on the resource console, so make sure you check those out before you sign off. And like I said earlier, we are going to send you a link to the on-demand version of this training tomorrow, so you can watch it again or send it along to one of your colleagues. But on behalf of GovLoop, Genesis, and Google Cloud, I hope you enjoyed this session. And as always, we really appreciate and value the work that you do. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at our next training. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.